We'll call the TRPA Transportation Performance Technical Advisory Committee to order Friday, May 8th, and it's 1:33. So I'll pass it over to Jessica to do a roll call.
Okay, so I'm going to call out the agency name, and if you're here representing the agency, please say that you are present and state your name. So, Caltrans? I'll come back to Caltrans. How about City of South Lake Tahoe?
Yes, Mohammed Qureshi, present.
Make sure everybody can hear us. Hey, folks online, can you hear us? Can you give me a thumbs
We
up if you
can. Can
hear
you
me?
hear us?
Oh, we can't hear him. Dr. Q just said. Yes. He said yes, but he can't hear him, yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Are you not on the phone? Dara, can you unmute and see if we can hear you?
We can hear you. Can you hear me?
No. No.
Well, I can hear someone.
We just had to turn up the hour.
All right, we have you, Dr. Q, now.
I
Okay.
can hear, yeah, I can hear Dr. Q. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, the volume on our owl was all the way down. So now that we've got taken care of, let's start from the beginning. So Caltrans. Okay. And then we saw the City of South Lake Tahoe. We saw you, Dr. Q.
Yep. Here.
Douglas County. I'll come back to Douglas County. El Dorado County.
Donaldo Palorone for El Dorado County.
Great, thank you, Donaldo. Nevada Department of Transportation. Placer County.
Yeah, Andy Dyken here for Placer County. We may have others joining too, but I know I'm here.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Andy Dyken?
Great, thank you, Andy. South Shore Transportation Management Association.
Here's Steve Pichera.
Great, thank you, Steve. Truckee North Tahoe Transportation Management Association.
Caroline Craffey.
Thank you, Caroline. Tahoe Transportation District. U.S. Forest Service.
President Daniel Cressy.
Daniel. Carson City. Come back to Carson City. Washoe County.
Dave Solero for Washoe County.
Great, thank you, Dave. Environmental Community League to Save Lake Tahoe.
Yep, Gavin Baggert here.
Thanks, Gavin. And that concludes the roll call. There is a quorum.
Great. And I think a couple people online, Jessica sent an invite to join as a panelist. So if you accept that, then we're able to hear you if we weren't able to hear you earlier, because I know I saw Kelly on there and Phil, and so maybe that's.
Yes, so both Kelly just got the invitation, and Philip, if you can accept that invitation to join as a panelist, then we'll be all good. You'll be able to speak freely. And I will mark Kelly and Philip as here.
Okay, perfect. We can move on to public comment period, the third item on the agenda. Any member of the public wishing to address the committee on an agenda item, please raise your hand either in person or by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone. And you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. And this comment period is reserved for items on the agenda. Comments on other matters may be redirected to the public interest comment period before adjournment of the meeting. Is there anyone who wishes to provide a public comment?
There are no hands raised to comment.
Okay, thank you. I'll close the public comment period. Next is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Thank you. I'll deem that approved as posted. And then next item, agenda item 5, approval of the minutes. There's a draft set of minutes from the last meeting that we sent out from May 20, this is not the right date, from April, found in your packet and online. Does anyone wish to make a change to the minutes?
I don't know if I have a change, but just a comment. I noticed that when I was referenced in the minutes, I was referred to as Dr. Q, which I appreciate, but I don't think it was ever defined in the list of attendees that Mohammed Qureshi is Dr. Q.
Sounds like a movie.
Thank you. We'll update that for this set of minutes going forward
Yes. And we'll correct that in the
previous
previous
minutes.
minutes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there are any additional comments, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone object? Motion passes. Okay, moving on to the agenda item 6A, really the focus of today's meeting after all that procedural items. Discussion and possible recommendation to transmit the 2026 Transportation and Sustainable Communities Performance and Recommendations Report to the TRPA Governing Board. And before we dive into this item, just kind of a reminder of the committee's role, being to help us draft and refine this report, and then make this motion today to transmit it to the governing board. And then the governing board is the approval entity that has 90 days after TRPA staff transmits it to provide feedback or comments to the report.
Can I ask a question, Rachel? So there's no actual presentation to the governing board, as I understand it. It would end up, if they approve it, it would be a consent calendar item, is that?
Dan might want to speak to this one.
They don't actually need to approve it,
That's what I was asking.
but if they don't agree with any of the recommendations or findings, they need to provide written notice to this group. And then we would need to reconvene
I see,
and
okay.
consider. So if any of their recommendations, the governing board disagreed with, they would provide notice to this entity in writing. And then we would have to reconsider them, or you would have to reconsider them.
Did you say it's 90 days that they have to chew
That's
on it?
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it won't be an actual item for them to make a motion on. Will be more of, I think, the staff letting them know it's available to review, right?
In Julie's executive director's report, she'll have
Okay.
an
90 days seems generous.
You're like, you didn't give me that time to review the report.
I wasn't gonna say that.
The 90 days is in the regional plan.
Okay,
And so since they draft the regional plan, they
Yeah,
gave
okay.
themselves.
That's
90
all you need to
days
say.
review. Yep,
it's in the plan.
it's in the
Yeah.
plan.
It is a little confusing, so it's a good clarification. Next slide.
We can include a recommendation to shorten that period in the future if you'd like.
So we'll go through the changes to the report in the metrics and data section.
Okay,
Dan will provide an update on DP 5.4 funding milestone, and then I'll go through the updated 2026 recommendations and what we changed since the last time we talked to you and how we incorporated your feedback. Next slide. So starting with the changes to the report, for the transit section, we added ridership data on the seasonal transit services, airport shuttles, and van pools to that primary metric of total ridership data. So you'll see that reflected in that chart. And then in the explanatory section, per the committee's comments, we added more contextual information on some of the upcoming improvements, like the Lake Link expansion planned for this summer, and on some of the staffing and safety challenges that don't impact those primary metrics, because without staffing and with turnover, it makes it challenging to provide increased ridership, and so it does have an impact on those primary metrics. So we added some more data that TTD provided. They estimated about a $9,000 training cost per driver And I think it was about 35% turnover rate based on last 6 months of data. So we added that in there to add a little bit more context. And happy to keep expanding that section in future reports. For the active transportation section, we updated the bicycle level of traffic stress analysis to also include neighborhood and local streets. Still keeping the focus on those primary roads, being the main connector routes, but still reflecting what's going on in neighborhoods to make sure we're still tracking progress there as well. So that has been added as additional data. And then for the automobile section, just a minor change to reword the 95th percentile to slowest travel times for clarity. So any questions or comments on these changes?
I just have a question regarding the transit section when we get to that part.
Sure. Is it on this data or is it on our?
It's not on the changes, so I'll just wait.
I think now's a great time if you want to.
All right, well, for the record, Steve Bashir, South Shore TMA. So on page, whatever it is, 7, so I'm just asking, so regionally, 72% of the population is served by basic service, which is defined as 60 minutes, right?
Correct.
And then it says, microtransit wait times typically average around 15-30. For purposes of this analysis, it's considered basic service. So since 30 is more than 20, we fall into the basic service category, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the same with TTDs, like 30-minute frequency on Route 50. It does fall into the basic service, even though it is kind of in between.
Yeah,
It goes above that. It's
difficult
more
to
frequent.
work as hard as we do and to be tarred with the basic service label.
I understand that. And to provide a little bit of context, I think, too, on the frequent service definition, that 20-minute definition is not one that we necessarily selected as TRPA, but aligns with the state of California's definition
Oh, I
of
always
frequent
wanted that.
service. Which does have implications with like there's CEQA exemptions if you have frequent service, and so that was kind of the reasoning for selecting that as the definition. But I understand Tahoe is a bit different than cities in terms of what is considered frequent.
Yeah, and hopefully when we transition to the zone service this summer, we'll be able to improve our standing.
Yeah,
All right, thanks.
yeah, good question. Any other questions on anything kind of in chapters 1 to 3 on the metrics or data before we move on?
I know, I was just gonna add,
Sure.
some of you may have missed that first meeting, so feel free to ask questions. That's what this is about. While we have to be formal, we're
Yeah.
also very much related.
On the active transportation, do like the scooter rentals and things like that play into that?
They don't, I think, play into our current metrics. It's something that we could track in the future. But I think we're limited in how much data we receive from the vendors. I think we get it from one of the vendors, but not the other.
Yeah.
But that could potentially fall into like the explanatory section in the future, I think, of the active transportation.
And do commercial rideshare, Uber, Lyft, does that play in any way?
I believe so.
Yeah.
They're both included in the total trip counts. So if the scooters that are rented go past a bike and pedestrian monitor on the trails, they would be captured most likely as a bike, given the speed
Right.
of travel. So they're captured there, as well as the Uber and Lyft are captured in the traffic counts. But we don't explicitly segregate them out within the reporting.
Mhm.
The scooters would be interesting to look at. They do get a ton of rides. I mean, if we know that, might be able to get it from Bird, I could try to help reach out too.
I know Kira Richardson's online and
Yeah.
she has definitely tried in the past,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I
appreciate.
have
the
two. I
support.
could try again.
Yeah,
Or even just like doubling it to have the same amount of scooters out, both companies.
that's an easy one to
Yeah.
track, right? Cause I think we get that from the city, like the number of.
We know number of scooters, yeah. So if you just took Lime's ridership and like doubled it, it'd be rough estimate. It's hundreds of thousands of rides a year. I mean, it's,
I think I saw one.
yeah, they're out. They start May
Someone-
1st. Yeah.
That's on one right here. on some right-
Yeah,
right-
made you think about it.
Yeah.
May 1st, yeah.
We can note those things for the future, like you said, explanatory.
Yeah, I think always continuing to update and define what we're tracking, so that's always helpful feedback. Any other questions on any of the data?
So if I could, Steve Sheriff for the record. So I'm wondering, because this is basically a reflection of past data. And it goes to the governing board and they look at it and there are certain things that it talks about trying to improve to the extent that we know things are be changing for the next cycle of reporting. Could staff do a little context to the governing board saying, you know, since this report was adopted or recommended by this committee, whatever the right word is, you know, certain thing. My example would be that, you know, as of the summer of this year, the Lake Link service will go to zones so that they know there's an effort being made to try to improve the wait times. And there may be other examples that if the staff had a little preface to the report, you know, so the governing board, particularly those who may not be as familiar as some of the other members, like the local government people, could say, oh, they're making progress, that they're moving forward. It's a good thing. Just, you know, just to let them know that we're not static here.
Seems, yeah, that totally seems reasonable. I'm also, I mean, what came to mind first, Steve, was, is it maybe it's just a general recommendation that but then that leaves it too vague. It's better, as you described, probably in the report.
Yeah, to the extent we have specific examples to show where progress is being made, I think there's some TDD progress that should be reflected,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of the service, right? 7 days on 50, that kind of thing.
We're gonna try.
Yeah, so if we know those things, by the time this goes out to the governing board, it would be helpful to show them that, you know.
Yeah. Or we can get them in the report if we know also, you know.
Yeah, you know, just want to make sure they know that
Yeah,
we're trying hard as best we can,
yeah.
move forward.
Definitely. Any other comments, questions? Okay, I'll pass it over to Dan to talk about the funding milestone, which is appendix, is it 5?
It's appendix 5, so it is, if you're looking at your packet, it starts on PDF page 62 or numbered page 60 or 57, excuse me. And I'll just provide a little context for why this is coming to this committee. So this committee was formed by a part of our regional plan and given the role of providing guidance to our governing board in the implementation of the transportation program overall, but also in executing transportation strategies to reduce VMT per capita, which is one of our thresholds. And the committee has a role both in evaluating the primary metrics that it decided on. Those are the metrics that Rachel mentioned earlier: active transportation, auto, and transit. Those are, and we have milestones for those in DP5 that we evaluated and we've already talked about. DP4 is our funding milestone, and we have 2 milestones that I'll describe, which this committee also has a role in assessing the status relative to the adopted milestones. So if you go to the next slide, when we adopted this, there were 2 milestones that the governing board established that they asked the committee to weigh in on. And we'll go over each of those individually. But to put you back in time, so we're back in 2020 land, we're in COVID. We are looking at the 2020 RTP and the regional funding line item within the regional transportation plan. So if you remember at the time, there was a bi-state transportation consultation on transportation that was charged with closing that funding gap to implement the entire RTP or the constrained list of the RTP. And so we're writing these milestones in advance of that and setting a deadline first for that, the consultation to develop that funding strategy. That's that first milestone by December 31st, 2021. And then the second one is the 2024 revenue milestone, which is to begin implementation of said plan. Next slide, please. So the question related to the first milestone, milestone A, is did the consultation arrive at and endorse a funding strategy to close the regional revenue gap? And many of you remember prior to the 2022 summit, so this is after the deadline established within the regional plan, the bi-state consultation did coalesce around a funding strategy. And you'll see the signatures of the leaders of the bi-state consultation, which is the Secretary of CNRA in California and the Director of DCNR within Nevada. They coalesced, and the whole partnership, I shouldn't just say they, coalesced on a funding strategy dubbed 777, which basically followed the existing EIP model and said all sectors need to come up with an additional $7 million a year to close this $400 million funding gap. That was then submitted. The Nevada legislature endorsed that. California's legislature has not, but it was submitted to both after the deadline. So if you're reading through the assessment, we've assessed it as being completed, but not in the timeline provided within the regional plan. The second one, which is if you followed our conversations, and next slide, please, has been more controversial, is have we did that plan start, and is it reasonably expected to achieve the needs set for it within the RTP? So we have now had 3 years of implementation of this funding strategy, 3 full cycles. So the 2023 fiscal year, 2024 fiscal year, and 2025 fiscal year. The text is incredibly small. I apologize for that. Maybe it's better if you're at home. But the funding target in each of those years is $21 million. And in each of the years, we have exceeded, we being the partnership writ large, has exceeded the revenue target for that year. And the accounting for this, and you may be confused because if you know our transportation spending, that is not the total of transportation spending within each of those years. And again, this was to the 777 strategy is to close the funding gap of identified sources within the RTP. So any revenue stream that was already included within the RTP, the revenue forecast of the 2020 RTP, is excluded from these calculations. And we've had a lot of conversations, I think probably with, I guess, both state and local jurisdictions around why is this source not included, or why is this not reflected in it? And the story is, if it's included in the revenue forecast, it can't be included in 777 because it's not additional revenue related to that. So the funding, what you see here, the summary here, is that those are revenue sources outside those already identified, and that each of the first 3 years, we have exceeded the revenue target for the 777 funding strategy. So the assessment based on that success and the continued commitment to implement that strategy, we're suggesting that the second milestone has also been achieved. And this one was achieved prior to the deadline. So it said it shall commence implementation prior to December 31st, 2023. The bi-state consultation actually accelerated the timeline for implementation of the funding strategy from starting in 2023 to closing the full fiscal gap in the 23 fiscal year. So that's the year ending September, we're looking at federal fiscal year, sorry, September of 23. So by the time it was supposed to start, the full year of funding for that was already in place. And that's a summary of the assessment. The full details are in but start again at page 57 and continue for about 3 pages in the packet.
So on this one, does this count as like governing board finding that the funding milestone was met? And then this policy is like done in the regional plan? Or I guess what's gonna be the outcome of this report being transmitted to the governing board?
So the governing board would have the option of rejecting the assessment.
Okay.
And so that this committee, I think, initially needs to say, do we want to transmit this? Or do we want to modify this? And then the governing board would have 90 days, just like any other recommendation within the report.
Okay.
They would have 90 days to say, no, we don't think this is correct. Or this group should go back and look at it again. Or if they don't object, they can just accept.
Dan, is there a breakdown for the local private?
There is, sorry, I've collapsed that on this chart though.
I'm kind of curious if like the totals, $6, $8, $9 million, like what percentage is South Shore, what percentage is North Shore, what percentage is city, county, vice versa, right?
Yep. That's something I can follow up with you. We've
Yeah,
got that.
I'd
the
appreciate
full
that.
breakdown.
Yeah.
And we actually have a full breakdown by the individual funding sources that we can share with the group.
Yeah.
We can share the slides as well at the end of the meeting, Gavin.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on this specifically before we move to the recommendations? I want to make sure people have time to comment or agree or.
With regard to 777, it's theoretically covering the cost of the base program, right? The base RTP.
Correct.
It's not expansion. It's not furthering anything above what $20 million going through.
So back in 2020, the
Mhm.
RTP, right, that line item was a little different. That's where we have to go, like he's saying, kind of taking you back versus this RTP
Mhm.
was different. Back then, we had a little bit more robust of a transit,
Right.
vision and plan. Versus now, we did definitely, working with all of you, scale that back.
Okay.
But we also then assessed, like, we're gonna continue this work, this
Yeah.
777. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that answers it, Jim. It's kind of hard to go back to 2020.
Yeah. I think I understand I think I have an answer to my question.
Yeah, so it's now baked in, as we say,
Yeah.
in the 2025 RTP. And that doesn't get us, right? That only gets us the basic services.
Right, I mean,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
looking at what, 15, at least 17% cost increase in services and projects between
I know.
2021 and now, right? So 777 is not worth what it was in that time frame.
And it was only supposed to fund a kind of like a specific set of like high VMT reduction
Right.
potential projects. And there was some transit on there, but I mean, it was also like Fanny Bridge.
Right, I was looking at the list of the
Yeah.
projects in the appendix, yeah.
Oh, you mean the
The
dollars
777,
here?
the $20 million
and the projects
was,
that
was kind
are
of targeted
Yeah.
at a specific set of like 10 projects or something.
And you know what?
Even though the
what-
money didn't have to go to them, but that was kind of the
That's right.
idea.
Gavin, you're getting to a good point, which I think you're familiar with is, while this was, sort of the vision and the accounting, it's really challenging, right? This is accounting for a one-time project. That's why you see a big fiscal year 24, right? Versus this, that, because it's about also those funds coming in. And, some years are smaller than others. So that's some of the challenge with the accounting is that it's gonna vary.
I mean, I think also like to acknowledge I think maybe Gavin was gonna start to get into it, but to acknowledge the difficulty in evaluating this from the committee standpoint.
Yeah.
Is that when the regional plan measure was written, many people envisioned a single funding source that we could clearly point to, and it would say, it would be like a basin entry type fee.
Mhm.
And it would be a very easy role for this committee. There'd be none of this type of accounting.
Exactly.
Because you could just see like how much was raised by the toll.
Right,
And then we'd say, to Jim's point, is that enough or is that not enough? And where we landed through the bi-state consultation is a very different type of plan. from what was originally envisioned.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think the type of plan that was to be put forward wasn't pre-baked within the regional plan. So we're left with both, do we think they fulfilled their job in coming up with that plan? And then do we think it can be long-term executed? And so it is, I mean, I think it is more challenging from our seat or to, you know, produce the assessment
Yeah.
than we'd originally imagined, whatever that is, 6 years ago when this was written.
Online with
I
hands
don't
raised.
see any hands raised,
Um,
but all the folks who are panelists, you all can speak freely. Unmute yourself.
I mean, I think maybe to Jim's point and to try to capture, like, part of the committee's recommendations could be to look at the increasing costs and, you know, how to continue to support that level of service given those costs. I can't remember if we have that already within the,
You can consider that as we go to the next item.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, in terms of the recommendations.
yeah.
I think there's one on supporting funding for transit
So maybe it's already
specifically,
captured.
but maybe not for everything. But yeah, let's go into
That
the
makes sense.
recommendations.
Yeah, this is my only kind of thought on it is just like, keep tracking it, even though it's. I mean, the funding gap, that $20 million is a little bit of a moot point now because it's been wrapped up into the 2025 regional plan,
Forecast,
regional
yeah.
transportation plan forecast, but like. I still think it's valuable to track, like,
Yeah.
in finer detail, like where funding is coming from, which we were doing for a few years, or you guys were doing for a few years under the 777. So I think continuing to track that is valuable. And to Jim's point, like especially local jurisdictions, you know, how they're
Right.
doing.
That's a good point.
You know, whether it's like sustainable money, that $20 million is coming in every year. I mean, again, it's accounting, who knows? I don't know that. Yeah. But at least like continue to track it going forward, I think is a good idea.
Do you see that as TRK's role outside of this report or being tied to like this report, having that tracked in it?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if it really matters where. It's just nice if it's done each year, because otherwise it's
Yeah.
done every 4 years with regional transportation plan, and now we've got these every 2 years twice, you know, like it's now we're done every 2 years with this group. I don't know if it matters like how or where it's tracked, because it'll come out through this group, through regional transportation
mean,
plan, through transportation committee, the governing board, through TTV. I mean, like, the information will come out, so,
Right,
yeah, as long as it's
It
being
may be
gathered.
summarized in this report. I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Definitely.
yeah, it could be rolled
It
up.
needs
in
built to the
here.
regional transportation plan, you know, so, yeah, I don't know if it matters where it lives exactly.
Okay. So I'll start going over the 2026 recommendations, and for anyone who wasn't here last time, for some context, we talked about the recommendations that were in the 2024 report. And we talked about a status of progress that you'll see in chapter 4.1 of assessing what is the status of those 2024 recommendations. What have we done since last time over the last 2 years? Being in progress, not being a bad thing since it's only been a couple years. And then carrying over most of those in progress recommendations to this report. And removing the ones that were completed. Is kind of what we landed on, and I'll go through that as we go through these updated 2026 recommendations. So first, we have a new category. Normally, the recommendations have been matching the metrics with those 3 categories of transit, active transportation, and auto. But we've heard from this committee, from public comment as well, that having multimodal recommendations would be helpful because there are recommendations that span all of those modes and aren't really in a silo of just one of them. And so this is the new multimodal recommendations category. You can see a lot ended up landing in this category, which I think is great. It shows just that crossover that we've talked about. And so this first one is a new recommendation that was suggested by a committee member to evaluate methods to measure transit propensity, pedestrian propensity, bicycle propensity, and auto propensity as another tool to, help inform project development or where you're planning future projects to make them more successful. The second one is to evaluate modal accessibility. Every 4 years in alignment with the regional transportation plan requirements. I think given the current administration, we didn't really want to say equity. Having it aligned with the regional transportation plan requirements allows that flexibility depending on what the current federal requirements are around equity or accessibility. So that was kind of one of the reasons for this wording and to help us meet those RTP requirements and align with that. The third one is to evaluate other methods for estimated regional mode share and where possible report and track mode share by jurisdiction, trip purpose, and traveler type. And so we had mode share as a recommendation in the previous report, but this one has been updated to now have some of the comments we heard of maybe tracking by jurisdiction or by traveler type would be helpful information. So that's a change for that third one. And this one was previously in the auto section and now is in this multimodal section. The fourth one is just a carryover of exploring the creation of a multimodal level of service index for the region. Again, this was previous in the auto category and now it's moved to this multimodal category. And then lastly is to incorporate intelligent transportation system data collection, such as TTD smart grant data into metrics when available as appropriate. And I think given some of these projects being pilot projects or just kind of starting off and not knowing all the data that's going to come out of it, decided to keep it a little bit more broad to be able to incorporate it where it makes sense and as we get data from that project. So I'll just pause for any comments or questions on these multimodal recommendations, and any of those newer revised ones have that little asterisk at the end. And for those who recommended some of these last time, does this match kind of what you were thinking? Does this align with why you suggested it? Like, did we capture that right?
Yeah, and I'm gonna call you out. What do you think?
No, I think so, yeah, no, this is good. I'm really happy to see this for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this would be really, really useful going forward, especially with regional transportation planning and yeah.
Yeah, I really like the multimodal category. I
Me
think
too.
that makes a
Yeah, I
lot of
think it
sense.
works
too.
well.
I hope we're able to get some good data in it. I'm a little worried that, because our discussion last meeting, last month was just like a lot of this is maybe hard to capture,
Right.
Yeah,
but I think it's worth it to try. Like I said, I didn't want to create more work for you guys, and as long as you're
Yeah.
up for it, I think it's worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, we can move on to transit. We can always come back to any of these too if you think of anything. Oops.
I wanna go check on Steve. Sorry.
Okay.
Didn't have to make that for the record, but somebody's on the phone. We don't talk about travel. Maybe we go to another category.
Sure, we can jump to active and then come back to transit. It'll be the next one. Perfect. So for active transportation, again, removed the recommendations last time that had been completed, including those that were in reference to updating the regional grant program and updating the TRPA code of ordinances. This might look a little bit lighter, but that's partly because of that new multimodal section that's taken some of the recommendations that were in this category last time. This first one, we did have this recommendation in the last report, but have updated the wording. So it's to support funding, implementation, and policy strategies for local jurisdictions and other partners to perform maintenance, conduct year-round clearing, and improve wayfinding. And this previously was just to support funding and now just added implementation and policy just to broaden it to other strategies that could help support local jurisdictions. The second one is consider additional resources, staff and funding to expand the effectiveness of the trip reduction ordinance to support reductions in BMT and single auto work trips. I think that's one that Steve might be interested in as well, because I know that was one of his comments at the last meeting, but we had a recommendation in the last report that we marked as complete because we updated the trip reduction ordinance during the regional transportation plan. And there was a comment just to, even though we have updated that to make it more efficient and improve the effectiveness of it, just to make sure that we keep that in here to keep supporting implementation of that ordinance and not let that fall away. And then the third one, consider monitoring travel time for pedestrians and bicycles along corridors that connect popular destinations. We discussed last time how this is something we don't necessarily know how we're going to track yet and might be a little bit challenging, but we still want to work on this and figure out if this is something we could do. So keeping that in here to continue to explore. Any questions on these active transportation recommendations?
Good question on it. So the first one talks about funding for maintenance, et cetera. Is supporting funding for implementation and expansion, is that appropriate in this kind of context? You know, I'm thinking about, you know, we're working on the, you know, West Shore. We're planning additional expansion of active transportation network. Does it make sense to advocate for implementation? I'm new to this, so I don't, you know, I'm trying to listen, like where's the right setting, what's not a right setting.
I'm trying to tease out, so where some of that comes from is knowing that there are so many grants that give you money to build something but never to maintain.
Yeah.
Right, and so a lot of this came from this group and our public works working group and groups you've been involved in. So we wanted to make sure that that funding wasn't just implementing, right? It was also, so expansion, I think maybe we could do maybe a rewording to get to that piece, but I also don't want to forget about that maintenance piece, but.
I'm curious, like, is there a target for delivering the active transportation planning recommendations?
I feel like we used to
by
have,
jurisdiction, right? So the target for City of South Lake Tahoe, for example, might be 5%, right? Is there any sort of context for that?
not, you know, in this report, but I do recall when I began in 2017, I think we had set something, maybe when you were maybe working at the city, it's like 5 miles a year. There was I feel like there was something in the EIP program, but we don't have that. We don't have that now. You guys interested in that? Like, is that helpful?
I mean, it's so highly dependent on what grant funding you're going for, what the local
One year you're
regional
gonna
match
go
is.
gangbusters and the next is.
Yeah,
Which I think is maybe where we landed, but
yeah.
I think I mean, we could track instead of setting a target, track what
was built.
what's happening by
That's a great point.
jurisdiction, maybe.
Right.
I know we have total miles of improved or constructed bike paths or sidewalks in this report, but it's not broken out by jurisdiction, so.
Yeah, because in your previous slide, you mentioned like a service index in your multimodal, right? And I'm kind of curious, is that service index taken into consideration, you know, miles built, you know, projects completed, you know, as sort of an element of how the performance of a particular jurisdiction is doing with regard to making progress on the RTP.
so that's a great segue, kind of back to what Daniel was asking. I think this stems from the regional transportation plan project list, right? Like this report is evaluating, are we implementing those projects on that list? So the advocate for, you know, additional, that project you're talking about, that expansion, it was one of those projects in the RTP. So yeah, it's not so much specific to like advocating for more, this is about that regional transportation plan implementation. So, yeah, as that gets updated, then this reflects that kind of cycle.
Doesn't this also take into account though, that the ongoing maintenance is a real thing for all of the things we're adding in all the other plans? Just to
Yeah.
make sure that local jurisdictions and others realize that, you built this stuff, now you gotta maintain it. Because if
Absolutely.
you don't maintain it, it's not gonna get used and all those other things.
And I mean, I looked at a couple regional transportation plans. I do think it's great that we actually have a category for maintenance and operations. I don't remember when I was working in Southern California seeing that, but that was a while ago. Maybe now people are doing that, like calling out those specific, pieces. So,
Dave, I'm not familiar with Washoe County and how you do your CIP program, but at least in TTDs, we have a cost forecast for maintenance and operations post-project, right? That we specify when we start that project with our board, saying that, if we take this on and we complete it, then you need to add to the annual budget and operation and maintenance X. Whether or not it ever gets added, who knows?
I think we identified it.
But we're forecasting it, right? And we're bringing it as a cost.
Yeah, because it's either a forecast, with a cost that is going to either, if you add to it, then the service level stays the same.
Right.
Or if you don't add to it, then the service level of the entire network goes down.
That's
So
right.
that's the trade-off.
That's right. Do you want to defer it for a long time and inherit, a major headache at some point down the road, or attack it annually?
Correct.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the transit one, but we can always continue this conversation. Helpful. Just back one slide. Okay. So for transit, and Steve, we jumped to active because we wanted you to be able to be here for the
Sorry,
transit section.
if it wasn't
Just-
my tax lawyer,
No, it's all good. I just wanted to let you know where
I would have let it go to voicemail.
we're at.
So when you say support strategies for securing and maintaining flexible operating dollars to increase, what level of support is TRPA willing to provide?
I mean, I think the Tahoe transit study is a good example of this in developing.
I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but
In evaluating a funding strategy, and identifying.
so specifically,
ways-
South Shore TMA has been asking the city for some data so that we can explore forming a business improvement district to help fund transit on the South Shore, Lake Link, and maybe to some extent, the TTD services. And this has been 2 years and we still haven't gotten the information we need. So would TRPA be willing to talk to the city and say, hey, why don't you do this?
could you elaborate on the data you're tweaking?
Yeah, it's revenue data associated with business types in the city, so sales tax principally,
Uh-huh.
and to some extent, maybe TOT. And the city has that information through their relationship with HDL, which is a company that does that for a lot of jurisdictions. And we recently did get the list of city businesses and the types of businesses, which is important. But we still don't have the economic data, and we're not asking it in specific business. We're not asking for proprietary information. We're asking for cumulative data. Because if we go to the businesses, we have to know which businesses are we going to? And they're gonna say, well, what are you talking to us about? How much money are we talking about? So we don't have any information to share with them. So it's a circular thing, and if this is a transit recommendation, if the TRPA was willing to have, conversations with city leadership about
Right.
why from a transit perspective and a regional and South Shore perspective, why this is important, that would be helpful. But I don't know if you're that old.
If I can add just a little bit to this, this is Kira Richardson with TRPA for the record. I think that we have been working with locals, federal agencies, state agencies to help secure more dollars for transit. We've introduced legislation to try to secure more money for transit. So I think this recommendation is all encompassing. And I do think the T-bid is a good example of a strategy that we would support. I don't know that we need to drill into like very specific details on like we need to go talk to the city. Like I don't know that that's an action that fits here, but I think that's a good example, Steve, of something that we could help with. And I think there's a lot that TRPA does to help secure more money for transit.
Offline conversations, I just didn't, you know, I mean, I see the recommendation and that leads me to, how do you define it? And so I offered one example of how you might define it and, you know, we don't have to beat it up. It just, you know, it's frustrating when, you know, and then you have people, you know, in the city, on city council saying, well, where's the private sector?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. My understanding is that Devin Middlebrook from TRP is helping with the T-bid, is that right? So he's.
I have no evidence of that, although I don't necessarily disagree. Devin is very helpful in any number of ways.
Yeah, so I would connect with him on the city and see if he might be able to support you on that a bit further.
Yeah, he has credibility as a former council member and mayor, yeah. Okay, so beat that one up.
So just a quick overview, most of these are carried over from the previous report. With some of them have been removed that were already completed. We also omitted the recommendation from the previous report on housing, because we discussed last time how that didn't really felt like it was in the purview of this committee. And then we added this 7th recommendation to support regional training coordination opportunities for transit operators, to try to support like a regional training facility, or just coordination to make it lower cost to train new CDL drivers. So.
Or obtain legislation to ban CDL altogether. That's ultimately what I'd love to see.
I think that's a great idea, Jim. I'm in favor of that.
That's a big lift, though.
I know it is a big
lift.
lift. A big lift.
Yeah.
But you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want to, before I go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, from our standpoint, thanks, Steve. We're working on almost every one of these,
Yeah.
so we're fine with this list from TTD's standpoint.
But in terms of, we discussed if TRPA staff writes a context for providing this report to the governing board, and I can't remember if this is already in there, but Lake Link and Jim with TTD fixed route, we are integrating the services on an ongoing basis, working on that. So that's number 2. And so the governing board should be made aware of the fact that that's an ongoing, that's already had some beneficial effects and could continue to have some additional beneficial effects as we go along, so.
Yeah, and in section 4.1, when we talk about progress from the last report, that was definitely one of the things that we highlighted.
Just want to make sure we have
the effort from Lake Link to coordinate with TTD and how you redirect riders to the fixed route if you're within the walk shed of Route 50. So
okay.
Feel free to let us know if you want us to bolster that, but I think we kind of captured that.
Yeah, that's fine.
In that recommendation.
If these fuel costs don't start coming down, I might ask everybody to help push the bus.
Honestly,
Okay.
cut some holes in the bottom for our feet.
Yeah.
Flintstone model, exactly.
Go viral, and you do a video, and then that'll create some advertising revenue.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, 2 and 3 are pretty similar, but yeah. I'm good with all these. Are you good with all these?
Yeah, these, I think they look great. I really do want to I really do want to start the discussions on this regional training coordination. I really think there's an opportunity there, not only for CDLs for transit, but CDLs for snow removal drivers.
Yeah.
Other public works staff. Like to really start engaging with our locals on that.
I don't think, for any of this, but thinking about some of the work we're doing of limiting the unmanaged, highway shoulder parking. Limiting that supply could increase demand for transit ridership. So a little bit sort of a broader actions that are maybe indirect to transit.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there, just to keep us thinking about that.
Yeah, they're definitely not in a silo, and that will impact. I think it'll be interesting to track too, how ridership changes with some of the changes on 28 this summer. And if you see a change in ridership on Route 28 as a result, I think that's something we should keep track of.
Yeah, maybe a highlight for the next report.
Yeah, and I know this is into the weeds and a lot of, but from a transit perspective, like we'd like to explore like categorized expense programs like recreation transit, for example, would be categorized and separated from urban transit, and connector transit would be separated from, you see what I'm saying? So that we can define the program, right? The sub-program of the transit program, if you will. So we're kind of trying to toy ways or figure out how to do that, have clarity to it, right? So it's not so confusing for everybody.
And that would be kind of like how TTD tracks your expenses more specifically, or?
Yeah, but I also, yes, but I also believe it would be beneficial for this entire team and the RTP and other things, because I think, you know, when you're talking recreation travel, you're talking primarily tourism, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
When you're talking your urban travel, it's your commuters and your housing. So, right now, we just lump everything into a
Right, it's
program.
all transit.
It's all transit.
Yeah.
You know, we'd like to start breaking that out a little bit and seeing what the performance and funding mechanisms are and the costs, so to speak, to run a particular program, whether it's recreation-based transit or urban transit.
I think we're kind of lucky in one sense that a lot of the trips on 28, obviously, right? Or the summer route to Sand Harbor, like those categorize themselves, right? And Emerald Bay, same thing.
They do, but for us, like putting together the future plans, right, to run the rest of SR 28. Everything I want to have, this is just internal, but I just want to have a separate sort of sub-program of transit that focuses on recreation corridor. Right?
I think that's a great idea.
And some of that, I wonder how does that, I like the idea too, but then thinking about how our recreation corridors are eventually gonna probably be the link between north-south,
Sure.
North Lake and South Lake, like how does that? Something to figure out in the future. That'd be a nice problem to have in the future, is trying to figure that out. But,
Yeah, I mean, with the talk.
That will be kind of be the evolution potentially, though.
Yeah, I mean, Santini Burton, you know,
Right.
wherever that may be, that brings a whole different dynamic
Yeah,
into this,
true.
even though we can't use it for operational.
Right.
reasons.
Well,
It's,
Yeah, we were not really even allowed to use the word transportation
right,
in Santini Burton because of that lumping of everything together.
right. But if we can make, you know, if we have a sub-program of transit, that's
Yeah.
recreation, then
Totally.
now we have a defined category, you know.
Santini Bird's purposely vague enough to, And if we get a T-big going on the South Shore and.
I'm curious about these
Together.
transit recommendations, and I'm sorry if I missed it in the rest of the report, but we talk about Park Tahoe here, about parking revenue as a subsidiary of funding transit in any of
Would you
these.
think that's explicitly mentioned and?
We should be.
I think it should be. I think we need to start bringing Park Tahoe really to the forefront of boards and committees and whatnot, now that it's actually expanding, thanks to the Forest Service.
I'm trying to read them quickly, Jim, but I know, I mean, it's also Placer County's a great example and their parking program in the,
Right,
in the town center, keeping those revenues. I think that's what you're talking, when you say Park Tahoe.
yeah.
It's like keeping the revenues here.
Yeah, I mean, we talked earlier about, you know, deferred maintenance and paying for O&M and everything, and that's really what Park Tahoe is all about, right? To be able to put those dollars back into the asset and in a system that supports that asset and not impact these other funds that are out there that we could leverage for bigger and better projects.
Yeah. I don't know, yeah, maybe it's missed here. I know it's in the regional transportation plan. It's a
That's fine.
policy.
I don't
But-
really know if we need
Yeah.
to
To
call
call
out
it
Park
out.
Tahoe, but maybe, you know, parking fees.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe more holistically,
Yeah.
parking fees.
Are you thinking more in tracking it as a data point or more in the recommendation side?
It's in the recommendations for more
Yeah, it's
funding,
right.
right?
Right,
For more implementing it?
right.
Okay,
We have a good handle on barriers to transit.
I just had a presentation this morning on all that, yeah.
I mean, so I'm just
You know,
coming in,
you mean barriers to like why people aren't using
Yeah,
transit, not to
yeah.
the actual
Yeah,
operation?
yeah, exactly,
Of it,
exactly. Social barriers.
I mean, I think that's one of the reasons we added that propensity idea,
Yeah.
maybe trying to measure transit propensity.
Good.
And that could speak to it a little bit and trying to understand who is most likely to want to take transit or, and we do surveys that kind of get to that a little bit, but I think that's where it's maybe.
So the transit, was it a study or a survey, the one that you did recently, the technical memo 1, was that what it was?
The Tahoe Transit Study Existing Conditions memo?
Yes. That was really good because it showed who takes it and where they live. And, you know, that's pretty important information.
Yeah, we do onboard transit surveys about every 2 years or so, and that has really valuable data, but it's more on who's actually using transit and not the people that aren't taking it, because it's only asking the actual transit riders. So it's part of it is very, very valuable data, but not as much of the side that you were referring to, I think, on the barriers of who's not taking it.
Yeah, we were kind of kicking around concepts of like, you know, you have safe routes to school. Like we were kind of kicking around safe routes to transit. Because with safe routes to school sort of philosophy, you take the location node to school and you build out from that location to provide a safe access for pedestrians or cyclists or school children or whatnot. But I feel like kind of like, at least in our system, once you get beyond the first block of Highway 50, there's nothing. I mean, other than some arterial roads like Ski Run Boulevard and whatnot, there's nothing. There's no sidewalks, there's no lighting, there's absolutely nothing for someone to walk 4 to 6 blocks to a bus stop safely at night, right? So we're kind of figuring out, like, from our own capital delivery plan, like, should we be talking about like a safe routes to transit type concept?
I will tell you this, in the active transportation plan, when we selected, you know, having a Sierra Boulevard for every neighborhood, it was thinking about at the end of that boulevard, whatever street it might be, it's making sure that I mean, it's gonna connect to the transit hub.
Right.
It's not gonna be just some random street
Right.
in that neighborhood, right? It's a primary.
It's a,
So
collector road or
that's right.
whatnot.
So in
yeah.
that, you know, when we were considering that and talking about that in the active transportation plan, we were making sure it connects to something.
Yeah,
Don't invest in infrastructure
Right.
like that, like on Sierra, if there's not a bus stop within a few feet.
exactly. Don't
Yeah.
build all these improvements in an area that isn't
Definitely.
directly served by alternative.
It's
roads.
way more valuable if it
Right.
connects to the bus stop. Yeah.
And I think there's ways that we can use our existing analyses to help provide data. Like you could
Yeah.
take the pedestrian experience index and add a buffer for a certain watershed within the transit stops, and then just evaluate what is the pedestrian experience index, and that's that particular area. If you're a quarter mile of a transit stop or a half mile of a transit stop, and provide that data if that's helpful
Yeah,
in the future.
yeah. I mean, I think, you know, again, we're exploring just some stuff, and I'd love to sit down with your team and
Yeah, I
figure out
think
how we could move it along.
happy to support that for sure.
Kelly Norman just raised her hand. Kelly, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you guys. I've just been listening to the conversation, and just sort of a general question. Listening to all of the recommendations and then some of the specific comments, the one about, you know, should we have a specific 5-mile increase of, you know, particular bikeways or walkways or whatever. Would it be helpful if, and maybe you guys are already doing this, is with these transit recommendations, we're trying to set you guys up for success. So I think being general recommendations is a really good idea. But you guys are also providing a lot of really good examples of metrics to quantify a lot of how these recommendations can be tracked. Is it helpful as we go along with these recommendations as we are proposing them to also identify the specific metrics that we would like to track them, so that we can find out how we're doing or if it's providing value in any way?
think that makes a lot of sense, Kelly. And those could be either metrics just that we add to like the explanatory section. And or, you know, if the committee wants them to rise to the primary metric level, I think that's something we could discuss too. But I think guidance on what else you want to see us tracking is always helpful to make it more useful.
And at the same time, I'm like, every suggestion that I make, I'm also cognizant of the fact that I'm also staff and I realize that it's more work. And so but I'm listening to your specific suggestions, and a lot of it is the metrics that we can use to track these recommendations. And so it may be that your team is already thinking about the ways in which you can fulfill these recommendations. And so it may be helpful to identify those along with these recommendations. And it may not have to be in the report, but just something that we're all thinking about, because I hear you guys thinking about all of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're all thinking about it and sometimes mentioning it, but not always calling it out. So that might be helpful to include a bit more specifically.
I think it's also something, Kelly, you can share offline and you can like review how we evaluated the recommendations to date. Cause you'll see some of these ideas considered there when we've said, is it in progress? Is it complete? And provide guidance for us as we produce, you know, both this report and then the next round of reporting, the things that you think we should consider. And I think you can do so, you know, without fear that that's like a ton of extra work for us, because we can communicate back to you and say, we couldn't find that particular metric, so we're just going to use these to evaluate progress. But I think anything you can share is useful and actually lightens our burden, because then we don't have to think through how we would evaluate each of these on our own.
I agree.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, open to any thoughts now, or like Dan said, feel free to email us those recommendations.
I want to kind of a little bit of a go back to see if we want to add 8 recommendations for transit, which could be like support agreements, mechanisms to keep parking fees collected at the source, to support maintenance and transit. I mean, something somewhat broad. Like I said, it is a policy in the RTP, but it could very well be here as well, if you feel strongly about it.
Yeah, it could also go in the multimodal section, because that's that crossover,
Yeah,
I
that's
think,
a good
between auto and transit.
Yeah.
So maybe either of those.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Trust us to add that accordingly.
Yes, we have all the trust in the world.
Okay, for time, I'm gonna move to auto recommendations. And that'll be the last category, and then we can take any go backs as well. So auto is just 3 recommendations, with some of the previous ones moved to the multimodal section. And these are all carryovers from the last report, but with some changes. So the first one, I think we heard last time just that how important this is and continues to be of promoting coordination and dissemination of real-time traveler information on construction projects to minimize travel delay. The second one, consider updating the region's effective population model to use the State Department of Transportation counts rather than streetlight counts to improve the consistency through time of estimates. And this just had some language changes to specifically reference using the State Department of Transportation counts instead of streetlight. But we did have a recommendation last time on the effective population model. And then that third one is updating the BMT threshold baseline to reflect Caltrans revised 2019 BMT estimate, which is in progress. Any questions, comments, suggestions on any of these auto recommendations?
The first one is really specific to construction impacts. And I'm wondering, what came to mind was like other congestion impacts, or, where you're trying to get to, cars not the way to get there now. There is no parking where you're going, and everybody is looking for parking and clogging up the roads. My question, like, is construction impacts too narrow, or is the
Right.
objective really tied to construction?
So it'd be maybe instead just real-time traveler information in general, not just construction projects, but just getting that information out to the public, no matter what the delay or congestion is. Could be.
That's what came to mind.
And I think where this came from was in the analysis, what we see is the biggest delays are during. Yeah.
That's just in terms of the data.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where, but yeah, are we all in agreement? We can keep this a little bit more general so that it's not so
Or
specific.
the construction and.
Yeah.
Just call it summer.
And I mean, I think this ties a little bit to the ITS recommendation too, of that potentially helping with real-time traveler information through further ITS projects.
Is there a Caltrans representative on the meeting today?
We're not, yeah.
I mean, we're still trying to push the synchronization. The signal synchronization in 50 on 50, like. That's a huge.
You mean
but
coordination of signals?
Yeah.
I did.
Synchronization, yeah.
I gave an update at this at the TTIC meeting last Friday, but I met with Caltrans last week and they said they have plans to coordinate the signals across the whole US 50 corridor this summer. As part of
that before, yeah.
So
Love to see that.
I would love to see it as well.
And Eric always comes back, he's like, well, they're all coordinated, they're just 3 different zones, you're like, that's not coordinated, then, dude. Like, what?
Right. But they said that it's gonna be coordinated, not just those 3 zones, but across all of the signals and the new ones and the PHBs as well.
Okay.
Which I think will be great if that.
Interested to see how those go, yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see that happen.
Me too.
So I think we'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah.
I think.
Let me know
We
how
do
that
have
turns
some
out.
leverage with, I think the TISMO plan aligns with that and kind of keeping conversations going on that and tracking that progress.
Deal.
Any comments on any go backs on any of the recommendations, anything we discussed? Just open it up to before the next thing on the agenda is just a motion, and so we have about 15 minutes if there's anything the committee wants to discuss further, clarify.
And thank you guys. Thank you all for being here today. I know it's a Friday in the afternoon. Yeah, appreciate that.
I think we all responded to a doodle, so did it to ourselves. I don't think you guys were organizing, putting all this together so quickly after the last meeting.
Mhm.
Do you want to, Michelle, go through some of the changes that you noted that we heard that we might make to this report? So I think what we'd want from the committee today is a motion to transmit the report, but we can say with these changes made, so maybe we can just list those off and see if we got those right before asking for that. You can have it up.
Yeah, so the changes I've noted, so we'll say when we're ready for that motion. One will be adding to multimodal recommendations, support and agreements or mechanisms to keep parking fees collected at the source to support maintenance of parking, trail and or transit operations. And then the only other change I had was in auto. I think we'll simplify by removing the words on construction projects. So it'll read, promote coordination, dissemination of real-time traveler information to minimize travel delay. Instead of calling like, because then it could be congestion or this or emergency,
I'm wondering, like, are folks really focused on construction and is there value in actually putting that word in there? Are folks gonna say, yeah, they heard me?
So I know Jamie's not on today, but I think the recommendation partly came from Placer County TART at the last committee of some of the travel delays with transit and construction projects and needing that coordination between like knowing what's happening and shifting,
Okay.
allowing buses through if they're at the front of the queue. So I think there might be value in still including that, but it doesn't need to be limited to it.
So then what would we,
You could add some,
So real-time
you could
travel
add some,
info.
like some focus on, you know, busiest time, peak season in construction or something like that. Just so it's like shows a little bit of like prioritization towards those times or a little bit of focus on those.
I like that. I think the recommendations are meant to kind of like narrow us in on what's the priority. And so broad is good, but it also can be helpful to know what the top priority would be.
so,
Like next year, they're gonna replace the Meeks Bridge, Caltrans will, so that'll really mess with Emerald Bay, the north route.
Well, Emerald Bay will be messed with this year with the whole
Yeah,
fiber optic
fiber optic
installation,
too,
which
yeah.
we just found out. At least I just found out about this
That was
week.
going on last year too, a little bit. So
Yeah.
They dealt with it a bit last year too. But yeah, it's like examples like that of just like knowing it's coming and we have a policy or we develop some kind of policy that transit should be prioritized. Like maybe there's something there. I don't know. I don't know where like this goes, like
Yeah.
where this all heads. Like how do you take like this idea? Like, is this group, can we do anything to try to get like Caltrans and NDOT to prioritize transit? Like, I mean, is that?
Ultimately, right, that would be a great
It
success.
seems like we should be like kind of building towards something like that.
I mean, out of like traffic control.
Yeah. Yeah, like if they see the bus, like flag the bus up and let it go first, I don't know. Or something, or like, I mean, if people are waiting for a half hour, is there any way they can, you know, coordinate it? So it's like they close it right after the bus goes through? Or I mean, it seems like there's pretty small operational things that can be done to make transit a little more desirable.
Yeah, it might be
I
good
don't
to
know.
connect with Placer County, because I think they did have a little bit of success of like, if the bus is at the front of the line to let them through. Before stopping traffic, but
Or if we see it coming, like wait until it gets through before stopping
Yeah.
or something.
I feel like
I
there's
don't know.
maybe some options there.
About. Promote coordination and dissemination of real-time traveler information during busy times and on construction projects,
During construction season.
during
Yeah.
construction, which is
During
during
busy times.
construction season. To minimize travel delay. And provide priority for transit.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
giving consideration maybe to transit.
Maybe.
I think you've got it basically there.
With consideration to prioritizing transit. The meeting minutes will help us remember why we talked about this. Okay, so we have only two changes, one addition in multimodal and a little bit of rewording under the auto.
Is there anyone online with any comments on that?
No, there's
Okay.
nothing raised.
Are we happy with a motion to transmit the 2026 report with these changes that Michelle mentioned, or is there any other additions?
All those in favor?
I think I need someone to make the motion.
Yes.
And then we need a simple majority of the quorum present for it to pass.
I'll take a stab at it.
Thank you so much.
Dave from Washington County. Move to transmit the 2026 Transportation and Sustainable Communities Performance and Recommendations Report with the two identified additions during this meeting to the TRPA Governing Board, as shown in attachment A. with the additions.
Sounds good to me.
Seconded.
Perfect. Did you want to do a roll call vote?
I think a simple voice vote is fine. We can just,
Okay,
if everybody agrees, say yay, and if anybody doesn't agree, say no.
perfect. So all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
All right, so it passes unanimously, it sounds like.
Okay, perfect. And then the next item is kind of just a procedural item, on any additional committee member comments. So this could be anything not on the agenda that you want to discuss as well. I know we've had open discussion throughout and always welcome that, but just because it's on the agenda, it should be the next slide. Yeah, just give a chance for any additional final comments.
I don't see any hands raised, or anything. Nobody's unmuting themselves.
Okay. And then the final matter of business is the general public interest comment period. So this can be on any item listed or not listed on the agenda, may address the committee at this time. Individuals or groups who have already commented are not permitted to comment on the same topic. So if any member of the public wishes to speak at this time, please raise your hand now, using the raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom screen or dialing *9 on your phone. Do we have any comments online?
There are no hands raised to comment.
Okay. With that, I need a motion to adjourn, which I was reminded last time when I forgot. So could I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? You. And we are done with 5 minutes to spare on a Friday afternoon. We're 2:55.
Oh, you were quick with that motion.
Yeah.
3 o'clock, come on.
3 o'clock Friday motion is a tough one.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.